Start with the news of the day, Caroline, that Andrew Dillon has finally been anointed as the guy or the role, albeit in a succession that continues until the end of September with Gil McLachlan to stay on.
That's it. So Gillon McLachlan will be a sort of consigliere, if you will. The AFL insists Andrew Dillon will be free to create his own team in that time, to reshape the executive if he wants, while Gillon takes care of the big deals. I think, given how long the process has taken, it's been embarrassingly long and damaging for some. I think it's unfortunate that Andrew Dillon today had to bat off questions about why the Commission doesn't have faith in him to start straight away. They insist companies do this all the time. I say the AFL has never done it. It doesn't happen in politics, but I'm prepared to wear that. I think, though, off the back of the long search, $1 million we hear the AFL will pay their international recruiters to find the bloke next door. There wasn't a good succession plan. I feel terribly sorry for some of the losing candidates. I think Kylie Watson-Wheeler has been embarrassed. I feel for Brendan Gale, but I honestly think this is a great appointment. I always thought Andrew Dillon would be a very good appointment, either him or Brendan Gale. He's one of the most popular blokes in Melbourne, one of the smartest people in footy I've ever dealt with. He's got a thick skin, Craig. He's very tough. He mightn't have the presentation skills just yet of Gillon McLachlan, but that will happen, and I really look forward to watching him run this competition, and I hope Gillon leaves sooner rather than later. I mean, we've already seen Andrew Dillon stamp his authority today, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. It was an interesting day. Someone said to me about 10 years ago, it didn't matter what room you were in, if Andrew was in it, he was the smartest person and the calmest person in it, never ruffled, and that only got Frank today's performances in the media, which you wouldn't have thought would have been a strong suit, to be fair, were superb at the press conference, and I thought even better on Fox Footy tonight. He looks like he is in control of the role already. The
way you two have spoken, though, then why has this taken so long, and why another 6 months?
Because he didn't have Richard Goyd as imprimatur, and as recently as 2 weeks ago, other commissioners in Adelaide were talking up Kylie Watson-Wheeler, but that in the end, Richard Goyder got there, and they've really copped it, both Richard Goyder and Gillon McLachlan. Just have a listen to some of their defences now.
2 or 3 years ago, I was given a hard time for having too many commissioners, and now it seems to be the other way around. So if you look back over history, the Commission's normally had 7 or 8 commissioners. We've got 7 commissioners at the moment. We're looking to bring someone on with some football expertise, and we'll deal with that as soon as we can sensibly do that. Yeah, when Gill announced last year he was going to go, it was towards the end of last year. The Hawthorn thing lobbed. We wanted to deal with that.
First of all, the football's pumping. I've not run into one supporter who cares in any way. They're loving the game, crowds and record numbers. I don't know who all these people are, the anonymous people who are furious, but the footy's going well.
Come on, Gillon, as if a supporter's going to come up and say it's taken too long to replace you.
But he's right, though. The average fan doesn't care.
Supporters don't care, but we're not here just to we talk to the clubs as well, and clubs have been very frustrated and they've dropped the ball in several areas. More of that in a moment. That was a poor performance by Goyder today. I know I'm his harshest critic at times.
I thought he was...
The Hawthorn thing lobbed. The Hawthorn thing. No, Craig, that is not good enough. That is a desperately sad and dreadful story. It's not the Hawthorn thing. And it's also absolute balderdash that he was copping it 3 years ago for having a big commission. That's not true at all. He's finally admitting he needs some football expertise. Hopefully that will happen. And I even wondered if it might be Gillon McLachlan. Gillon McLachlan is denying this. He's not eyeing off a commission spot, or they haven't asked him. But I also believe that as recently as last week, that they were still, Matthew, trying to convince Gillon McLachlan to stay. So not a huge vote of confidence for Andrew Dillon, but you know what? He's given it himself, and he's done it himself, and I've got full faith he'll continue to do it.
I hear you and others say that he needs to change, or will look to change the culture of the AFL and make it a safer environment. What do you mean by that?
I've never said safer environment.
No, he said it today. He wants to make the game safe and he wants to make the environment safe.
He today was all about football, football, football. I think there's been a suggestion that egos have got in the way, boys club, etc. He talked about the game. It's the game, it's the game. Community footy, which is an area he knows the AFL has dropped the ball a bit.
He was super impressive, and I disagree. I thought Richard Goyder handled himself very well today.
Yeah, but you're a client, so it's difficult for you to comment on that.
You can say, admittedly, not the best language on that instance, but overall very, very good.
Do you think Andrew Dillon being on will help Brendan Gale get to the AFL?
Yeah, I do. And
in what role?
He spoke very highly of Brendan and his intelligence.
Powerful
and
people
character.
behind the scenes are working as we speak on Brendan Gale to try and convince him to come to the AFL to head a much bigger footy portfolio with Tasmania
Has
as well.
this helped with Gillon moving on?
Oh,
Yes.
certainly.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
Completely.
And that's the move, right? If he puts himself in that running, he'll get it. That's as simple as that for me. And
Tough one right at the moment because he'll be feeling a bit bruised, as is Travis Holt, I'm sure.
I know you've got to run a process, but that's a role you just go and pick your person, don't you? I'm not sure you need to run a process. Just on the Tassie situation, well, first of all, on Andrew Dillon's agenda. So he was asked a couple of interesting questions tonight. It was inferred today, as Tony Jones reported on the news, that Andrew was in favour of a 2:30 grand final. That was franked tonight on TV, and he also went on to be specific about the roof or no roof debate, which quickly emerged with cricket's involvement over the weekend. Here's what he had to say.
Should the Hobart Stadium have a roof?
I think it's really important that we have an elite stadium down in Hobart, yes, and it should have a roof.
What's the best starting time for the grand final?
Fast money, best time, 2:30.
That really took the AFL by surprise today, the Commission by surprise, when he said that at the press conference. He really loved last year's grand final, which, let's face it, you can't have really loved unless you're a Geelong
The
supporter.
entertainment was terrific and the spectacle was great. The game was terrible.
He wants a day grand final, and I hope he gives us certainty for the next 5 years. I think the roof thing, well, the Prime Minister of Australia has said the stadium doesn't need a roof, and he sat there tonight and said it does. So Craig, you're right, he's starting to look like a leader straight away. Gillon McLachlan was speaking at the other end of town when that was going on, doing the David Parkin oration. But we're looking at the new CEO now, and it's going to be really interesting. Gillon told the clubs he might leave, in fact, before October, and maybe that's exactly what will happen. Andrew Dillon will take the reins.
And is it a to-do list that you think is on the agenda?
Oh, there's a lot to do, and Gillon will oversee some of this, but the head of footy we've just talked about, the CBA, it's already 6 months behind. It's got months to go. It has to be done. The Hawthorn thing is clearly vital, and there's still a lot of our argy-bargy there about mediation. The concussion issue is completely concentrating them at the moment. We need to know when Tassie's going to start. Is it 27 or 28? And the game in New South Wales is just such a big issue, and it only became more important, or it will only become more important now that Tasmania have got a team, Craig. I wrote about it on the weekend.
I read your story on Saturday, and I must admit I agree with most of it. It was a point well made. The game has significant challenges in wider Sydney.
The AFL's dropped the ball there, and the clubs in Sydney are frustrated, and the broadcasters are angry. I mean, this is the state that has 1/3 of the Australian population. It's providing 1 or 2% of the footy talent.
What's the fix then? How do you fix it?
Well, you've got to promote the game better for a start. I mean, there was no real promotion for Sydney versus GWS at the SCG. You move both, the AFL are thinking, move both derbies to the SCG. You start the season in Sydney earlier, so it has a chance to take on rugby. There's just...
The season starts too late, 2 weeks. You've got to bring one of those, like the Giants or the Swans, forward a week. The game is lacking social relevance Monday to Friday in New South Wales. I think the Giants are a drive-in, drive-out team. It's a real problem. They don't live in the community they serve. The NRL have got their act together. They're good. No one wants to hear it, but they are. And there's no...
Well, for Dave Matthews to admit the NRL is bigger now than when the Giants started. I think the other thing is, Matthew, when I was covering footy back in the early 2000s, the job of AFL New South Wales boss was an executive role. It's not anymore. I mean, they need a much bigger team with a heavier seat at the table.
And they need their cost of living back. They need the cost of living allowance back.
Yeah, well,
you need senior figures from the AFL, not the clubs in that market, who live there and act for the AFL's interest, not just the clubs.